Welcome to Media Melanie TV. Today I'm back to talk about Maxton Hall Season 2 on Prime Video. We just got the 3-episode premiere, and let me tell you, they are not playing around. We got thrown right into the deep end, picking up basically where the tragic ending from Season 1 left off. In case you need just a quick refresher on where we left off in Season 1, James and Ruby finally had their big moment at Oxford, despite the fact that James's dad Mortimer, who's literally like the worst dad ever, had said, look, you guys need to break up. But James and Ruby found their way together. But after the Oxford weekend, when James and Lydia returned home, unfortunately, they got the news that their mom had passed away from a stroke. Mortimer, being the complete jerk that he is, didn't feel it necessary to give the twins a phone call and let them know what was happening. So obviously this struck them as quite surprising and entered this cycle of grief for James. I mean, obviously Lydia is grieving as well, but this is hitting James pretty hard. Lydia, of course, is pregnant with Professor Sutton's baby, and we learn that it's going to be twins here in Season 2. So I'm interested to see exactly how that storyline's going to play out. And I do have a video coming up where I'm going to talk about a theory that I have that Percy could actually be the twins' father, and how Lydia's pregnancy with twins is perhaps mirroring Cordelia and Percy's affair. And maybe perhaps that's why Mortimer is just incredibly bitter towards these kids. Overall, the pacing is great for these 3 episodes. I will say some of the foreshadowing feels maybe just a little bit blunt, but that doesn't really matter because the emotional payoff is very much there. I guess the only bad news here is with getting 3 episodes up front for a 6-episode season, that means the season is literally halfway over. So there's only 3 more weeks of episodes. However, I'm going to be here every week with a review, a next episode preview, and a theory and discussion video. So at least we can keep the content flowing while we have this on our screens. But good news, the show is actually renewed for a Season 3 before Season 2 even aired, so we will most definitely be getting that. This series is based on the trilogy by Mona Kastan. The books are called Save Me, Save You, and Save Us. And also, if you have not read the books, they've recently been translated into English from German, so maybe if you want to see what does happen in the book, pick it up and see for yourself. But just a quick note up front, I have not read the book, so I am just going to be covering the show based on what we see on our screens. That said, I'm just curious, how do you guys watch the show? I personally watch it in German with English subtitles. I had watched Season 1 with the English dubbing, and there's something I think lost in translation a little bit about some of the wording, some of the narrative. So for me, I think it feels a little bit more authentic. Also, just hearing the characters speaking in their own voices. So my tip is to watch it in German with the English subtitles. And I know sometimes it can be tough to pay attention, but at least for me, it's definitely been worth it. And the show itself has been completely record-breaking for Prime Video. In fact, in its first week, when it aired in September 24, it became the most-watched non-US title on Prime Video, which really speaks to the emotional depth of the show. And yes, it is a teen, young adult type of drama, but I think these characters have a certain chemistry that makes you keep wanting to come back for more. All right, before I get more into my review of episodes 1 through 3, please be sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already so you do not miss a thing with Maxton Hall. I am also covering It, Welcome to Derry over on HBO. Let me just tell you, that show is scary AF, and even if you're not necessarily familiar with Stephen King's It IP, anybody can enter this show and watch it and still appreciate it. It is so dark, disturbing, and creepy, so I do highly recommend that if that is your genre. And then coming up next month, I'm going to be talking about Fallout on Prime Video, and that actually stars Ella Purnell and Walton Goggins. You may know Ella Purnell. She played Jackie on Yellow Jackets, which, by the way, is coming back for its 4th and final season next year. And yes, I will be here covering it on the channel. First, I just want to say, for me at least, there's a certain level of relatability here. I grew up not very well off in a town where there were a lot of privileged people, and I've got to say, one of my first crushes in middle school was on a guy that definitely had more means than I did. But there's something about these teen and young adult dramas that, as a middle-aged woman, thrust me back into my younger years, and I don't know, I just kind of appreciate that. There was also another super relatable moment here when Ruby throws James's lacrosse sweatshirt away. I had an ID bracelet from a boyfriend from middle school, and when we broke up, I opted to stomp on it in the street and smash it with a hammer. So I think these little moments really just capture the big emotions that a lot of us may have felt back in our junior high school, or just younger days in general. And for younger people who are watching this, who are in high school or going into college at the moment, I'm curious, do you find this to be relatable as well? I think it's interesting that there can be an appeal for both an older middle-aged generation like mine, but also younger viewers as well. What shows who are able to actually do that and broaden their appeal intergenerationally, I don't know, I think they work a lot better than ones that are specifically targeted for a younger demographic, or on the other side of things, an older demographic. So just getting into a little bit about what specifically happened in the episodes before I get more into some highs and lows. The way that this opened with the car accident, they were sort of leading us to believe with this misdirection that the accident happened on the first day returning to school, because James isn't there. Ruby's wondering where he was, but in fact, he was actually at a party. Ruby and Lydia end up there. James is a drunken mess. He's sort of getting it on with this other girl. Obviously, that is quite difficult for Ruby to see, but at this point, Ruby also doesn't realize that James's mom passed away, and a lot of these actions are due to this severe grief that he's feeling. But his arc this season was just phenomenal. The way he gave that speech at the Alice Campbell Gala, I was almost in tears, just like James and Ruby were, and I think everybody appreciated it, except for Mortimer. You guys, he is just such a big baddie. There are way too many men like Mortimer in this world, but what's interesting to me is his last name is Beaufort. The kids' last names are Beaufort, but Cordelia Beaufort is actually the Beaufort here, which leads me to believe that Mortimer actually took her last name, which I guess in England isn't super uncommon. And obviously, because she is from this wealthier family, I mean, obviously, Mortimer wants the last name, wants to be a part of this company, but the sense of entitlement and the poor way that he treats his children, again, I will get more into that in another video, but I despise him, and I think the show does a really good job framing him as this evil dad. I'm trying to think of other TV dads who are awful like this, and I'm curious, who do you think compares to Mortimer? I would love if you drop in the comments some other TV dads that give these creepy, jerky vibes just like he does. A big theme of these episodes is Ruby's tap to plan yet another event for Maxton Hall, which I guess feels maybe a little bit redundant, sort of similar to how Ruby and James and their like will they, won't they, and them treating each other poorly also harkens back a little bit to season 1. But there were some different challenges that Ruby was faced with this season. And I'm going to get more into this with the lows, but like Headmaster Lexington, you are just not very bright. Ruby is way more on top of the infrastructure of the school, specifically the stage lights, than he is. And the fact that he's like, oh, it's my school, not yours. Like, get out of here, Headmaster Lexington. With Sutton now as the deputy headmaster, I'm wondering, is he going to be taking over soon? Will that be maybe something at the end of the season? But then again, because he is the father of Lydia Beaufort's child, I'm thinking that he is not going to end up talking to Lydia. Lydia is not going to get in the way of him taking this job and potentially becoming the actual headmaster. So what is going to happen? Lydia has made a decision. We know she's having twins, which is, I guess, runs in the family. And by all accounts right now, it seems like she's going to keep the babies. And I've also just loved Lydia and Ruby's friendship. It is kind of an unlikely friendship that started because Ruby was the one that witnessed Sutton and Lydia together in the first place. But the sleepover, I thought that was really cute. And yes, it is unlikely, but I like that they are bringing these classes together. They're not making it so out of reach that Lydia is like, no, I'm not going to publicly be your friend. And while they don't have a lot of interactions together, I mean, the fact that they are forming this friendship and that Ruby is supporting her in this very difficult, traumatic teen pregnancy era of hers, I'm just really here for that storyline in general. Let's talk about the funeral for a moment. We learn that the woman who ends up coming in is Ophelia, who's Cordelia's sister. Now, as soon as that happened, everybody who's a Taylor Swift fan, obviously, The Life of a Showgirl, there's a song named Ophelia, and I'm thinking to myself, why didn't they use the song? But obviously this was filmed before Life of a Showgirl came out. So retroactively, I think that would have been a nice song to include. But it seems as though we're going in the direction where Ophelia is going to end up giving her shares to the Beauforts. And we still haven't had the will reading, which I imagine will be coming into play maybe in episode 4. So how is that going to go down? Is Mortimer going to be taken out of power? And if so, how is he going to take that? And speaking of the power of it all, when Lydia was being questioned by the press at the Alice Campbell Gala, I despise the fact that they called her an outsider and, oh, do you have to mediate between James and Mortimer? Whatever. Like, Lydia has shown and is working so hard to become an integral part of this family business. That was her wish at the slumber party when they lit them up and flew them away in the sky, which, by the way, visually, I just absolutely loved that. So if there's something I would like to see for Lydia, it's let her keep the babies. She wants to keep the babies. I like to see that she is making a choice and having a stance, and I'm hoping that there's no way that it will come into play that she has to make a decision where she can't have the babies in order to lead the company. That would devastate me. So hopefully it will not come to that. She will just gain control, hopefully from the will, because I'm thinking that Cordelia is probably going to leave the majority to the kids and not Mortimer, just based on what we heard from the sister Ophelia. But when James ended up leaving and speeding away in the car and getting in the car accident, I was so worried that he was going to be, I don't know, bedridden, paralyzed. So many different possible things could happen. And unfortunately for me, my brother passed away in a car accident. So immediately I had this visceral type of reaction. And to see him just walk away with virtually no injuries, yes, we can suspend disbelief. Obviously, he's the main character of the show along with Ruby. But I don't know, I guess I was just expecting a broken arm, a broken leg, something that would also physically disable him a little bit to help him work through things emotionally. However, he did decide to make the choice to go to therapy, which I just love for him. It goes back to that speech he made about sometimes you have to ask for help. And now there's this crack in the strong family armor where Mortimer's like, hey, we don't cry. When they had the flashback and he's talking to James like, oh, get back up, be a man, whatever. I hate that stuff. I hate boys will be boys. There is nothing hotter, at least to me, than an emotionally in touch man. And the fact that James is working through it, and Ruby gave him that advice. She's like, hey, you need to fix yourself here. Because not only was she mad about him hooking up with the other girl and seeing the text message when she went over to the Beauforts to comfort him after the loss of his mom, but just the fact that James was able to make that choice to go get help, and he's opening up so much with literal tears in his eyes, talking about Ruby, and also just taking accountability for having lost her because of his actions. Sometimes in these shows with the enemies coming together trope, I think there can be a little bit of disconnection and maybe entitlement, but that's something that they are not showcasing here. And for me, that is one of the top themes that I'm just really loving about this season so far. But just in terms of the overall highs, I did mention James's redemption arc here. And yes, it was a little bit of a callback to season 1 because there is this sort of divide now between James and Ruby once again. But I think it feels different because this time there is the element of seeking out therapy, asking for help, not just kind of making the decision based on the fact that they have chemistry. There's more emotional layers to it. I mean, seriously, his speech was 10 out of 10 and might be my favorite moment so far of these 3 episodes. And I'm curious, what is the biggest high for you so far? And I guess a low as well, if you have any. But was it the speech? Was it Ruby having success at this gala? Drop it down in the comments and let me know. And another high, that friendship between Lydia and Ruby. It's interesting because they're both struggling under the pressure of the Beaufort name in different ways. Lydia with wanting to lead the young Beauforts and obviously being pregnant, and Ruby with having these very strong feelings for James and having connected so closely back at Oxford, and now having to sort of distance herself once again. But the fact that they are finding solace in each other, I love the friendship. I love the fact that Ruby and James are inching closer together again. Everything so far has been very strong, at least for me. There are also some highly comedic scenes here. Sometimes they're a little bit more understated, but how awkward was it when Ruby and James were driving to the photo booth for this gala, and they're sort of sitting there awkwardly. They put the radio on, and the 3 most love songs ever come on, and the way that they're just kind of sitting there, I thought that was hilarious. We got I Am Your Lady and You Are My Man, Only You, and Kiss Me. That song choice, Lovely. So here for that. And actually, speaking of needle drops, I also enjoyed the Coldplay Viva La Vida song when they were scrambling in order to get things back on track for this Alice Campbell gala, because obviously the headmaster turned off the wrong switch despite Ruby telling him directly not to. But I actually love that song. I've always loved it. So I guess out of all the needle drops, that was my favorite. But the comedy on that car ride was just stellar. There's also a point where James and Ruby are still having kind of some awkwardness, and James is offering to help with the gala. And Ruby's sort of walking away, I think, with Lynn, and she gives him this kind of thumbs up, and the look on James's face, hilarious. These characters not only have chemistry, but they're also able to carry themselves and really become these characters. I think, first of all, James is quite attractive. I love looking at him. I mean, those abs, come on, get out of here. But Ruby, too, she just encompasses everything that a girl would want to be. Smart, she's caring, she's involved, she's a good friend. And while there was that sister storyline with Ember when she was almost kind of mirroring what James was doing to her in terms of keeping her away from the event, I mean, yeah, she didn't necessarily have the power to invite her, but at the same time, I mean, like, didn't she? She ended up doing it in the first place, and the dress that Ember designed, I loved that. Another funny moment involving Ember was when she did show up to the gala, and Kieran's like, I can't wait to nibble on your cake. I thought that was so funny, and I'm so glad that Ember is now being integrated more into the storyline. She was part of the sleepover, but now becoming more immersed in Ruby's world. And when Ruby's getting publicly recognized, I loved that too, when Alice took her on the step and repeat and said, this is Ruby Bell. And they asked what she's wearing, and she said it's Ember Belle Couture. I think there's actually some foreshadowing in there that perhaps Lydia could end up making Ember a designer for young Beaufort. So that way Ruby can go and succeed her dream going to Oxford. Ember can go and succeed becoming a successful designer. She's very good at what she does. She had designed the dress back in season 1. And despite the fact that she didn't think she was even going to be able to go to the gala, she's still sitting at home sewing up a banner. I mean, Sister of the Year. Not to mention, she ended up getting some in that photo booth with Ren. I love that storyline for her. Love it. And just even the comment she made about the dress that she made for Ruby for this gala. She said, it's a touch of Dua Lipa, a touch of Boss Babe. Couldn't describe it better. It was a very sophisticated dress. The color looks great on her. And they really are shaping Ember to be this high-end designer. And Ruby's family in general, her parents are so sweet. There was the whole chairlift storyline in season 1, and learning more about Ruby's emotional situation and how she actually blamed herself for the accident with her dad. And the fact that her parents put away the money for the bakery so that Ruby could go to Oxford and they'd have some money saved up for her. This family is incredible. This is the type of family we should all want. They don't need all the money in the world. They have love and compassion for each other. And just seeing a family unit composed so well, juxtaposed against the Beaufort family, I just love that duality altogether. And I'm also thinking, with this foreshadowing, yes, some of it, like I said, it does seem a little bit in your face. I do think the payoffs all end up being worth it. So with the bakery of it all and Ruby having told Lydia, you know, my parents are trying to get the bakery back. They're saving up the money so they can buy it back. For now, they're renting it. But does anybody else think that there's a very big possibility that either, I don't know, James or maybe Lydia will also help contribute to get the family bakery back and give them the money to buy it? Now, I'm not saying they should be throwing their money at everybody. Throwing money at things doesn't fix problems, although it was very helpful in getting the funding they needed to hold the gala at Maxton Hall. You know, James was able to go to his art contact and they were able to have the art auction, and then he got another private donation, and the headmaster was nice enough to throw in like the remaining $100. Ooh, you're so cool, Mr. Lexington. Thank you for your $100. After being a complete jerk for Ruby applying and then getting to run this gala, which was a very positive thing for Maxton Hall. And yeah, the finances of it all were definitely a barrier, but I just don't like this headmaster's attitude, and I would love to see Sutton in a place of leadership, but I also think the underlying storyline of Lydia being pregnant with his twins is going to cause some more drama as well. All right, just getting into some lows, and there's not a lot of them. I'm pretty high on these 3 episodes in general, but as I've been mentioning throughout the video, the foreshadowing with a megaphone, some of these things are just so in your face. Specifically, the fact that Ruby is telling Headmaster Lexington, "Are you sure you know how to shut the lights off?" And he's a little bit distracted when he's closing up, but I mean, come on, the way that they did the close-up on the lights, obviously it was going to cause a problem, and it did. It sparked. There was a fire in there. Some of the things were melted. But then I was also thinking, like, wouldn't it smell like smoke in there, even if they were able to clear out a lot of the items? I think the residual smell of smoke, like, I live in California. Anytime there's fires in the air, if you have your windows open, or even, I mean, if you don't, the smell of smoke just kind of absorbs into the room. So I was thinking there's no way they're going to want to have the gala there with the smell of smoke. So I do think that was one thing we have to suspend just a little bit of disbelief for. And that repetition of enemies coming back together as a very common trope. But like I said, because there are some different emotional layers here, because now James is grieving from the death of his mom, I'm okay with it. It doesn't bother me that much. But the biggest low for me overall is actually just Mortimer. I don't like him, but on the same token, they've done a great job creating this character who I think all of us despise. And the fact that he ushered James out after the speech and is like, "If I ever hear you talk like that again, we're gonna have problems. Beaufort men don't express their emotions," and all this nonsense that he's just spewing out. I don't like the guy, and I'm hoping that by the end of this, he ends up getting taken out of power because he's not even a true Beaufort. And not to say that he couldn't have earned his place running the business and whatever, but he has not earned his place for anything for me. Between the entitlement, the way he treats his children, not a fan. And then there was the drama and tension between Ruby and Ember. I was actually kind of getting mad at Ruby. I'm like, who do you think you are? Okay, yeah, maybe Ember does think these things are elitist and it's not her cup of tea, but I think because she wanted to go, Ruby could have at least not shut her down right away and said, okay, let me check into it. But it almost felt a little bit kind of like sloppy seconds, right? When Ember does get to go because, okay, now she's helping. But I do think it was more than that. I think Ruby did have sort of an emotional epiphany where she's like, why am I not inviting my sister Ember? Because she also enlisted the help of literally the entire school. When she went and asked the lacrosse team, there's also been this drama between James and lacrosse and his friend and making the promise because he needs to get into Oxford and he needs James there in order to succeed for this last lacrosse game or whatever. Don't really care about him. If any of James's friends I do care about, it is Alistair. I love his character. I think he's a great friend to James. In fact, I actually wish there was a little bit more of Alistair content. And I like that there is a gay storyline in the mix. Anytime they can infuse different points of view, different perspectives to truly represent what youth goes through, whether it's in England, whether it's in America, wherever it is, representation is important. And I just like that they are going there. And I love Alistair's character in general. But there are quite a bit of overarching themes here. Like I said, there's the enemies coming together trope, price of privilege, class divide, and pressure. And then fate versus free will, which is actually sort of referenced a little bit with the whole Midsummer Night's Dream situation in the philosophy class. But I like that there is representation of different classes as well. Yeah, Ruby is sort of framed to be this poor girl, she's on scholarship, but she's also proven to be an incredible leader, an incredible student who is earning her place there no matter what her family's financial standing is. The fact that there is this whole price of privilege situation, and James is now starting to rebel against that and not just being what appearances and images need him to be or what his dad needs him to be. He's being who he needs to be as a person, and there's truly just no greater character growth than that. All right, so moving into episode 4, I will be back with an official preview, but I think one of the things that I'm kind of worried about is Mortimer going to be pushing Lydia either to get rid of the babies or force her into some sort of arranged marriage situation with somebody that will be acceptable for the Beaufort family to hide the fact that there is this illegitimate pregnancy. And I'm also curious to see, now that Ruby and James sort of had this emotional connection after the speech, what is the next step for them going to be? Like I mentioned earlier, I will also have a video up on whether or not Percy could possibly be the twins' dad, and I will present some evidence for that as well. So first of all, please let me know down in the comments, how do you feel about these first 3 episodes? Do you think that they delivered? Do you think that maybe you wanted more? Do you think that there was too much packed into them? For me, the biggest disappointment right now is the fact that there are only 3 episodes left. So I think the momentum, the pacing has been good because they do have a lot to fit into 6 episodes. It's a relatively short season, but I also can appreciate when a show isn't forcing 8 episodes. Sometimes it feels too stretched out, and that's definitely not a feeling that I'm getting here. All right, drop all your thoughts, your theories, your predictions down in the comments. Let me know how you felt about this. And like I said, I will be back with previews, theories, and more so we can keep talking about Maxton Hall while we do have it on our screens. I appreciate you watching, and please do like this video, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. I just recently crossed 10,000 subscribers, and my goal before the end of the year was initially 3,000. So to exceed that here in November, it just feels so good, and I'm so appreciative of this entire TV community. Obviously, I love talking about TV, and I will be back again soon with more TV talk. Media Melanie, clicking off.